Hello and welcome to this Mindspeller product demo. My name is Hannes and I'm co-founder and CEO at Mindspeller. I'm excited to demonstrate our marketing research technology platform to you today. At Mindspeller, we try to understand consumer behavior by taking deep dives into the customer mind to reveal biases and prejudice that's difficult to capture with traditional marketing research, and that even might prevent you from connecting with your audience on a deeper level. The goal for this webinar is to show you how our software can help you improve the return on investment for any given marketing budget. I will show you how easy it is to optimize your brand story using Mindspeller's decision support software as a service. The examples in this webinar will illustrate how you can avoid costly campaign fiascos, for which reputational damage can run in the millions in some cases. You will also see that Mindspeller's AI predicts winning campaign content, which obviates the need for extensive and costly campaign testing. Finally, following the demo part of this webinar, you will understand how Mindspeller will skyrocket sales for your brand simply by fine-tuning your content so that it truly resonates with your target audience. Now, before we get to the demo, I would like to introduce you to my co-founder, Professor Mark van Hully. Mark is a key opinion leader in the field of brain-computer interfacing, and together we created the world's largest interactive brand association mind map. We created this map throughout the last 10 years by crowdsourcing spontaneous associations with different kinds of brand assets from around the world. Rather than asking the likelihood of recommending a brand, such as by the Net Promoter Score, we simply ask for 3 spontaneous associations with your brand. I have a brief video message from Mark in the next slide, in which he answers a frequently asked question about what types of neuromarketing are trustworthy. So let me play this short video message for you now. It's part of a mini FAQ video series available for free download on our website.
Is neuromarketing trustworthy? Well, neuromarketing is not a panacea. A good starting point is to adopt a scientific approach consisting of hypotheses, a control condition, and statistical tools to account for possible confounds. If one is interested in how customers really think about your product or brand, then one should consider a technique that records brain activity, as it is largely unbidden and therefore more truthful. Unfortunately, in neuromarketing, also techniques are used that do not record brain activity, but instead sweat reaction, eye movements, heart rate. These signals could be related to the customer's mental state, but maybe not. These techniques are less trustworthy.
Okay. Before we get to the demo part of this webinar, let's do a small warming up exercise. If you look at this image here on the left side of the slide, I would like you to write down 3 spontaneous associations that come to mind. Don't overthink it, just write down the 3 things that popped in your mind first. Okay, so let's repeat this exercise now with this visual here on the left. Again, just write down the 3 things that come to mind first, and don't worry about trying to get it right or score points. This is not a test to check your marketing skills or anything like that. So just write down what comes to mind, or keep the associations in the back of your mind. And let's wrap up now this intro part of the webinar with 2 final slides that will immediately illustrate the reason for this particular warm-up exercise. Here you'll recognize our 2 images from the warm-up exercise, the iconic Tropicana orange on the left and the modern glass of orange juice on the right. Now, you may be familiar with this rather infamous campaign fiasco from more than a decade ago, But what you might not know is that most neuromarketing techniques fall short in explaining this failure properly. Most implicit association tests force respondents to choose amongst a limited and predefined list of brand attributes to position the assets in standard frameworks with dimensions like enjoyment, security, autonomy, excitement, and so on. Now, the problem with these traditional techniques is that they fail to embed the asset in a more comprehensive network of spontaneous associations comprising the entire natural language. It's like saying a picture is worth only 6 words instead of 1,000. You're not capturing the full story. Now, let's move on to the demo part of this webinar so I can show you how Mindspeller could have prevented this campaign fiasco. Okay. So here you see the Mindspeller asset library, which is a standard digital asset management system that can also synchronize with your existing asset management library if you have one. So you see we have different types of assets here. We have logos, we have website screenshots, and we have a lot of stock footage. So on the right, you see the state of the asset. So this one is being positioned, which means we are asking at least 200 respondents for 3 spontaneous associations, just like you shared with in the warm-up exercise. And this allows us to position these assets in the overall network, connecting it to all other assets in the network. So you see, we also have tagging systems. So for instance, you can filter on categories of interest. And note that this is your private library. Oh yes, we also have a way to filter out your brand verbal identities, so the keywords of interest. And also we have a way to position multimedia assets like commercials and jingles. So, but going back to our image asset library, this is your confidential private asset library, but we also have a store where you can download a benchmark material. For instance, if we filter here on the food and drink category, you will see we have a lot of hallmarks here that you can use for benchmarking purposes. Now, let's go back to our library to find our Tropicana assets here. And you'll note at the top, we have the menu to navigate to our various applications. We have Pathfinder, Copy Optimizer, MindTracker as the main applications I'll show you in a minute. And we have some helper tools here, like the association wheels, Explorer, neuropositioning, and competitive profiler. So I'll start by showing you this particular asset in our association wheel application. So what you see here is the result of at least 200 respondents giving 3 spontaneous associations captured via a randomized online survey protocol. And you see here at the bottom exactly how many associations or responses we captured. In this case, we had more than 250 respondents. You also note here the stability score of 0.41. And the stability score is telling us something about the variability in the type of responses. So the lower the stability score, the more abstract the asset, or the less it evokes something specific in your mind. Now, this data set of at least 600 first-order associations allows us to position this asset in our mind map, connecting it via second-order associations to any other asset that we've positioned on the map. So these asset connections in a way become comparable to how all people on average are 6 or fewer social connections away from each other on LinkedIn. It's a similar type of network that we've built for brand connections. And we've mapped the entire natural language in the same way, so we can reveal how different brand assets distinguish themselves via spontaneous associations. Now, our clients use this particular application to highlight the more emotional, non-product category related associations, which are hidden typically in the long tail. So let's take a look here by clicking on this button. So we can reveal also the share percentage of a particular association. But we can, more importantly, we can browse here the long tail of the association wheel to look for more emotional points of interest on the map, if you will. So let's take a look here at the very end, where we have some interesting ones, I believe. So for instance, we have here the association with being a kid. So apparently this Tropicana orange is evoking memories with the childhood. But also maybe a less obvious one here is an association with corn syrup, which is not an association that would particularly come to my mind here. Now, note that we can also add our failed Tropicana asset here in a same association wheel. And if similar associations as the ones we've highlighted here were to be present in this failed Tropicana asset, it would immediately appear in the same color. So here you see it's hidden in the long tail, but we have no colors highlighted here. So let's give you the example with breakfast. So you see immediately this association being located in the competitive asset. Now we can also add a intended association, for instance, with childhood. Okay, and we can also pull up this association wheel and, for instance, select one of these color coding schemes to see if there's already some semantic overlap with one of the two competing assets here. Now, this is still, a very subtle kind of comparison, which makes it difficult to predict campaign failure, although we do see here already a weird association with carton that is visually distinguished here through this color, which is not appearing here in our winning Tropicana asset. But let's move to our competitive profiler application to really tease out the verbal brand identity of both, that is distinguishing both assets, I should say. So let's again select our famous iconic orange asset, and then we have the failed Tropicana asset with the glass of orange juice. And now this application will scan the entire network to reveal the verbal identity that distinguishes our asset from its competitor. And here we can more clearly see that the asset to the right failed because it no longer evoked the sweetness theme you clearly see associated with the iconic visual to the left. The associations that come to mind when being exposed to this new visual identity on the right caused a massive disconnect with the sugary sweetness theme that connected our iconic orange with the implicit goals of the target audience, which we can assume represents parents looking for vitamins for their children whilst secretly craving the sugary sweetness that reminds them of their own childhood. And note how this is a completely different explanation than the one provided by traditional neuromarketing methods based on predefined frameworks in which the assets are positioned through a forced choice intended association method. Note also how, in terms of semantic association, sometimes the opposites are very closely connected, like you see bitter appear here. Obviously, bittersweet is closely semantically related, but the overall theme here is clearly about the sugary sweetness that is differentiating our iconic orange here from a random glass of orange juice, which is even in this case just triggering association with the cardboard box. Now, let's take a look at the position of both assets in one of these traditional frameworks. As you may still want to use those, we can do that. So we pull up again our Tropicana asset. So we first select our iconic orange, and now we can pull up one of these traditional frameworks. Let's take the one we've seen here in the introductory slides. So we have the standard dimensions, like these are more abstract, as you see here: adventure, discipline, excitement, enjoyment, security, autonomy. So we can, of course, with Mindspeller also pull up a graph here that positions our brand on these standard dimensions. And the score here, again, 4.72, will tell us to what extent our asset is evoking this kind of dimension or associations with adventure in this case. Note, everything below 2.5 is random noise. There is no meaningful connection. But here we have already pretty strong connection with associations relating to adventure. Now, the problem with these traditional frameworks, as you will see, if we pull up our failed campaign asset and we regenerate the graph, it's again quite difficult to predict campaign failure for our glass of orange juice here, because the two are very closely together, positioned relatively closely together here, even though the difference of 0.2 is already statistically meaningful, because again, we're talking about the implicit level. To what extent is this asset eliciting, evoking this word discipline here on the implicit level? So that's difficult to do. So moving the needle is not such an easy task here. But the interesting part is that we can now add any word of interest here, or intended association, as we like to call them. So let's take a look at our sweetness theme. We also had, for instance, sugar, because this is what we are secretively craving. You regenerate the graph, and now again we see the difference becomes much more pronounced. So the green one is representing here our iconic orange, and you clearly see there's a much more pronounced difference. And since we know from Competitive Profiler, it's this theme that we should connect with whatever kind of new key visual we come up with. We should prevent a disconnect with this winning theme. Here it's clear that our failed campaign asset clearly does not trigger this winning theme. Now, let's move to a different use case here, since we are from Leuven, the beer capital of the world. So Leuven is in Belgium, and it's the hometown of the Stella Artois brand. Let's assume we are asked to create a campaign storyline for our to reposition our Stella brand to connect better with the target audience, or connect on a deeper level. So let's go back here and load these two competitive assets and see what kind of verbal brand identity distinguishes these two competitors. Okay, so here we have the results. And first thing you'll notice is that spontaneous associations can reveal biases and prejudice that people have with the brand. For instance, you see here that the association with Antwerp for Stella and with Ireland for Heineken seem to distinguish these brands the most in the consumer mind, whereas Stella is not at all from Antwerp, it's from Leuven, as I mentioned, and Heineken is from the Netherlands, it's not from Ireland. But maybe the reference to Belgium here in the logo, and the Stella logo, is triggering associations with Antwerp. And we have the green color. So apparently this is triggering associations with Ireland. So that's reality. We cannot deny this, and we should actually factor in this valuable prejudice biases into our research. Okay, back to the use case. So let's say we're trying to create a campaign narrative to reposition our brand to connect with our target audience on a deeper level. Now, with Competitive Profiler, we now know we can try to distill a verbal identity that reflects our brand DNA, a mental frame of reference, if you will, that we should avoid disconnecting from to prevent campaign failure. To articulate this mental frame of reference, we have created another application called Explorer, which helps you reduce this long list to a short list of candidate intended associations. Now, let's move to Explorer in this window. Here we have the Explorer application. And what we can do here is add this long list of intended associations. So we have Antwerp, upscale, and posh. Antwerp, upscale. Posh. So you see how granular these applications are. We have waffles, tasteful, elegant. We have all these words positions. Waffles, of course, the association with Belgium. Here we go. Tasteful. So what we're doing here is copying elegant, high class, luxurious, elegant, high class, luxurious. Okay, and then delicious and cookies. Okay, delicious and cookies. Okay, so what we're trying to do now is reduce this long list of keywords into a short list of candidate intended associations that we can use to create our storyline, our brand story for our campaign. Now, with this application, we provide inspiration to derive common denominators here, or words, keywords that can represent all of these qualifiers here to the left. So try to think of some words that could encompass all of these at the same time. It's not so easy to do, and this is where AI comes in handy. So let's load this graph here. We have some filters on the emotional load, valence, positive, negative, arousal, high or low arousal, or dominance. And so let's take a look here at these rankings. We have originality ranking, popularity ranking. So what this tool does is it scans the entire network and ranks words that best represent all of these long listed qualifiers here on the left side, with the purpose of finding one key theme, overarching theme that we can use for our campaign as a strategy for our campaign. So if we look through the originality ranking here, decadent, fancy, classy, refined, fine, sophisticated, you know, let's highlight some of these: refined, taste, food. I don't know about you, but what comes to mind when I'm selecting some of these common denominator themes is the foodie theme. So, you know, think about sophisticated, refined, tasty food. You automatically think of the foodie theme. Okay, so with that information, we can now move on to our main applications, Pathfinder, Copy Optimizer, and Mind Tracker. And I will start, in the interest of time here, I will start with a Copy Optimizer, because here we can now already enter our strategy. So for our stellar repositioning campaign, we want to evoke associations with the foodie theme here: gourmet, tasty, chef, you know, these kind of associations. And we can use, so either you have already a draft text or briefing, which you can score against our strategy, or we can move to the Pathfinder application. And I'll come back to Copy Optimizer in a minute. But here, this application will help you create a brand story or a draft storyline. So we select our Stella brand that we want to reposition, and we know now that we want to reposition it closer to the foodie theme. And if we load this particular graph here, you will see that it will provide inspiration by connecting dots to reposition your brand closer to the foodie team. Okay, in the upper right-hand quadrant here, you see nodes in the network that have a strong connection to both the brand and the intended association. So let's take a look here. We have party, smooth, relaxing, celebrating, bitter. You know, bitter is an interesting one because foodies are typically interested in the more refined tastes. It's the hipster crowd. You know, they're probably more into light, refined dishes, refreshing. Football is an interesting one. And note here the nodes in the lower left quadrant are perhaps a little bit less strongly associated to both our brand and our intended association, but therefore might, you know, provide more original inspiration. Now, you know, just by connecting these dots, and I've prepared this here in another window, if you sequence them in the right way, you immediately come to a baseline narrative for a brand story, like a relaxing hipster summer football party celebration with a bitter but smooth and light, cold, refreshing European beer. Okay, it's obviously it needs a lot of refinement, but this is a baseline text that we can now copy paste here in our copy optimizer, where we already added our strategy here. We want to elicit the associations with foodie in our target customer mind. And you see we get here immediately a score for this text. And we can now start to add some key visuals. So let's assume here we were suggested to consider this particular key visual for our new campaign. Note also we get an emotional profile here for this content that we are scoring with Copy Optimizer. And okay, so since, you know, picture is worth 1,000 keywords, you see we immediately have a relatively strong score of almost 6. And let's now see if we can optimize this content here. So for now, we'll just keep the same text, but we'll consider an image that perhaps elicits more these associations with our foodie theme. So you see here, this key visual obviously does this and also gets a much higher score. Note that the pink surface area here corresponds to the key visual. Now, you'll notice also the color coding of the words. And if you select here, for instance, the word football, you'll see here on the right side the individual score. So this word gets a score of 4.48 in terms of eliciting the intended association, foodie. It's always scoring against our strategy, which in this case is all about the foodie associations. And it will give you associations with the word football that might have a bit higher score. In this case, you see that the word match is slightly better here in this case. So we could consider using the word match in our narrative, and you will see the score slightly improved. Now, note that our clients are not just replacing individual words. Typically, they will revisit the entire sentence or paragraph to better evoke the intended association. That's what this is all about, trying to become top of mind here for the foodie segment. Okay, I just want to show you here that, you know, this is the homepage of the Stella Artois brand, and this is exactly what they are currently doing, using mental frames of reference that is eliciting this foodie theme. Now, in the interest of time, I briefly want to show you the Mind Tracker application. It's our brand tracker on the implicit level, driving 95% of customer decision making. And we recently did a use case for the FedEx versus UPS positioning. And we use the word fast as intended association, because let's be honest, we all want our packages to be delivered as quickly as possible. And note here that now we can track the position of the brand in time and relate that, for instance, to our campaign. You'll note here that the green dot represents FedEx, and on the dimension fast, you clearly see a substantial difference with the brand perception of UPS. And again, we can add standard frameworks like scoring against the dimension adventure or discipline. But here you'll again see that both competitors are much more closely getting similar type of scoring. So with that, I want to wrap up this demo and invite you to reach out to me for any questions you may have, either through our website, mindspeller.com, or by reaching out via my LinkedIn profile. Thanks very much for your attention and hope to connect soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.